Hello, and this is a book review. Interesting ideas, kind of a summary and favorite ideas, no quotes, but I found in this book or course, Why You Are Who You Are. I'll start with a short review. In general, I'll probably give this book / course about, I would want to give it a 5, but it's not really 5. For sure, I'll give it a 4, somewhere between 4 to 5, I guess. I might even gonna give it a 5 because there is no 4.5. Very good, very engaging. The professor is talking very well, eloquently, and very interesting idea. I did learn a lot from this course. It's not boring, not a lot of useless information, right to the point. I really recommend this. It's probably one of my favorite, or the favorite, great courses so far. Let's see the notes. Little differences in personalities can make big differences in life. So even a small difference, usually you can look at that. If you have a small differences at the core, the farthest you go, the more difference you'll see. Psychology and personality science are very similar to mythology. Due to an enormous amount of variables, it's hard to precisely predict. It's really hard to know what exactly is going on because there is so many variables, and so far we did not know mostly not anything, but we're far from knowing everything about personality and psychology. So it's a mess out there, and it's really hard to know and predict. Introvert is not the opposite of extrovert. Introvert is just being low on extroversion. Some people think it's the opposite. It's not the opposite. That's why I wrote this. Even I sometimes confuse a little bit. But introvert is just being low on extroversion. So it's not the opposite, it's being low on extroversion. There is a little distinction there. People high on neuroticism are more sensitive to negative emotions and used to experience them more often. It's nature and nurture at the same time. So people that are high on neuroticism tend to have more negative emotions and just experience them more often. Nurture at the same time. That's why we don't know where exactly it comes. So it could be also nurture and nature at the same time. So just experience them more often in the way they react to those stimuli. Agreeableness mostly narrowed to how nice are you to other people. So in some way, if you want to grasp what agreeableness means, it's a very good way to narrow down to how nice you are to other people. And I like this way to put it out. Consciousness is mostly narrowed down to doing what you need, or impulse control. So that's what conscientiousness, it's not consciousness, conscientiousness is mostly narrowed down to doing what you need, or impulse control. How much can you restrain yourself? The 6th possible trait is honesty and humiliation versus manipulation and selfish. So he proposes a 6th. So there's the big 5, he proposes a 6th trait, which is honesty and humility. I don't know humiliation, but humility versus being manipulative and selfish. That's another, could be the 6th. So if there will be a 6th, that will be the 6th. Affiliate motivation is how motivated are you to seek other people, company, which is not about extroversion. So that's really, I didn't know that before. Affiliate motivation. It's how much you look for being with other people, but not necessarily with people you don't know. I think it's mostly but you just want to be with other people, but it's not extroversion. You don't want to go to a party and meet people that you don't know. Maybe that's the differences between extroversion to being high on affiliate motivation, is if you like to be with new people or not. But people high on affiliate motivation would still seek other people's company, but only in a specific way, and could be high on affiliate motivation and low on extroversion. People high on the field of motivation tend to be more sensitive to others people feeling towards them. So it's a little similar, but so if you're high on the field of motivation, you want to be with other people. That's the idea. But and as a result, could be that you are sensitive to what people think or what people feel towards you. High achievement motivation, people tend to motivate themselves to achieve more and tend to overpack their lives with activities and challenges. So that's high achievement motivation. They can even motivate themselves and they overpack their life because they're trying to achieve a lot. So they overpack their life with activities and challenges. Power motivation is how motivated are you to control other people or a lot of people. That's power motivation if you seek or do control other people. Evolutionary-wise, there is no encouragement to be consistent. Consistency is only good for other people so they can predict you and maintain social bonds. So for you, evolutionary-wise, for you as an individual, there is no encouragement to be consistent, but there is from other people because your surroundings, your social surroundings do have benefit from knowing and predicting you and it helps to maintain social bonds. But personally, you don't. When seeing others people's behavior, we should first ask ourselves, what do they try to accomplish from other people? Sometimes you don't understand what exactly is going on, but when you see other people behave, that's what we need to ask ourselves. What do they try to accomplish? Why do they act in that way? I think it's good to be also for like a communication. It helps for communication. Sometimes it's like a communication idea of how to communicate better is to try to understand what the other people are trying to accomplish here. Okay, what do you want? What do you want?
Sorry, I can't help with that.
Let's Google again. All right. Emotion tendency is what urge do you have when experiencing a particular emotion. Fear often associate with getting away. Such emotion tendency is what urge do you have when experiencing a particular emotion. How do you react? So for some people, if you have fear, people are trying to get away. But it's not for all people. Some people use fear and they might attack. So that's emotion tendency. Emotion are reactions to a stimuli. We're not experiencing both negative and positive at the same time, hence nostalgia. So emotions in general are just reaction to a stimuli. How we react, it's similar to what we did here, emotion tendency. But we not experience both at the same time. I'm not sure what exactly the connection here to nostalgia, I do not remember, but we do not experience in both at the same time. If you remember what it means, I do not. Next, positive and negative affectivity refers to the tendency of a person to experience more positive or negative emotions in regard to a stimuli. That's positive or negative affectivity is do a person gets or react more positively or negatively to a stimuli. People who are more extroverted and agreeable tend to be happier. According to some studies, if you're high on extroversion and on agreeableness, you should be happier. Public self-consciousness refers to being aware of how others perceive you. Which might lead to anxiety when you think you're being perceived wrongly or negatively. So that's public self-consciousness. You're being self-consciousness of how do you go around in public, and that might evoke some anxiety if you think you're being perceived wrongly or negatively. You will get anxious. People who are hostile mean that they perceive others' actions as hostile, and they might experience anger or similar more frequent. So that's people who are hostile. They see everything that other people do as hostile, with a hostile touch to it, if you may. And they might experience anger or similar more often because that's their reaction to a hostile environment. Sometimes anger, sometimes could be fear or other emotions. Hostility is increasing blood pressure and hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol, which might cause heart attack. Additionally, social connections could weaken hostility, which in turn prevent the good outcomes. So that's what happened with hostility. It's actually have detrimental effect on our body as it produces more adrenaline and cortisol. Additionally, because social connection could weaken as you are hostile, other people are not seeking to connect with you, and that's prevent good outcomes as well, as you don't have social bonds. Affect intensity refers to how sensitive are you to experience intense emotions as a result from an event. So how intense do you feel as a result from a particular event? It also has a little spectrum that called affect intensity. People high on curiosity tend to be high in openness and low on neuroticism. Openness let you experience and act on it, while neuroticism prevent you from being curious and acting on it. So that's people high on curiosity. Usually they're high on openness and low on neuroticism, sorry. And the way it works, openness led you to experience and act on it. That's what you're more open to experience. And so, what is it? You're interested. While neuroticism, if you're low on neuroticism, prevent you. So if you're high on neuroticism, it will prevent you. But if you're low on neuroticism, you'll be more open, and you will be more curious and act on it. Epistemic curiosity refers to knowledge, while perceptual curiosity refers to sensory curiosity, like feelings of the fabric. So there is two different curiosities. One of them is more knowledge, epistemology based, and the other one is sensory curiosity, which it's called perceptual curiosity. And this is like an actual, you like feeling new things. You want to feel some things. Like fabrics or materials. So there's two different curiosity. It's interesting to know the differences. Usually it's like, oh, you're just curious. No, so there's people that are high on one and low on the other, and the other way around. How high are you on ambiguity tolerance will influence how fast you get into conclusions. So it depends how well you can tolerate ambiguity. If you're low, you will go to a conclusion much faster because you can't go through it because I can't do it. I want to know the conclusion. Intellectual humility refers to the understanding of the possibility of your beliefs to be wrong. That's intellectual humility. If you know that you can be wrong. Some people don't. People high on intellectual humility tend to be more acceptable of people's view and beliefs that are not the same as theirs. So that's what people are high on intellectual humility. So we spoke here, and they're more acceptable usually with other people's views. I think for cognition refers to how good the person is with arguments and being intellectually engaged. So that's the need for cognition. Some people have like this, they want to be always active cognitively, so they're better in arguments and usually are more intellectually engaged. Internal versus external focus of control refers to how much we attribute consequences to control or natural influences. So usually if it's like external or internal, some people think it's all external, like I have no control. Some people think I have all control, and you have all high and low on that spectrum as well. Self-compassion refers to how we treat ourselves. Oftentimes we might add another layer of negativity to something negative that happened. So that's self-compassion, is how we treat ourselves in general. Because oftentimes what we do is just add another layer of something bad that happened, and we're like if we're low on self-compassion, we just like add and refuel the fire with negativity to something that already is negative. Self-compassion in older people is, if you're high on self-compassion, you will beat yourself less for getting old, which happens by itself. So some older people are beating themselves for getting old, and if you're high on self-compassion, that might not be your problem. There is two dimensions of attachment. There is attachment avoidance, and there is attachment anxiety. In both dimensions, you can be high and low. So there is a distinction between two kind of attachments, so that one of them is attachment avoidance. So you don't trying to avoid attachment, and the other one is attachment anxiety. So you have anxiety when you have attachment. They're not the same. They have some connection, but they're not the same. People who use rationality to convince and influence others are usually high on conscientiousness and openness. So if you use rationality to convince or influence other people, usually you will be higher on conscientiousness and openness. Some people are more consistent with their trait, and some people are less predictable. For example, they can be more or less extroverted in different times. So it's not always consistent. So some people can be more or less extroverted in different ways, or different people, you can be more or low on extroversion. But there is also some people that are more consistent among different situations, and some people that are low. So there's a lot of variables. The more consistent people are with people that there should be a comma here. The more consistent people are, those are the people, just didn't write it well. So those people that have if and then rules. For example, if in a party, then be humorous. So those are the people that usually are more consistent if they have like rules. In the parties, they always being humorous. Those are the people that tend to be more consistent. Older people tend to be more stable with their personality as they find their appropriate reactions, and the environment is more stable as well. So that usually older people will be more stable. I really like the reasoning here, because they just learned by trial and error, kind of. They just learned how to react, and just like it becomes some kind of a habit or automatic reaction. Additionally, they just have more stable environment, which for younger people is not. Usually you find yourself in a new environment all of a sudden, different environment. Your friends are changing constantly, but as an older person, you don't have any. It's more stable. Evolutionary wise, it was smart to stay away from people with obvious infections. Now it's integrated as a part of our personality. So evolutionary wise, it was smart. If you see someone that have an obvious infection, you want to stay away because you're not going to get infected. But it's now, even though you know there is like a evidence of infection that is not contagious, you will still think it's contagious and you will stay away. So it's part of our personality. Evolutionary wise, women are more selective sexually for the reason that they have less option to spread their genes. So usually women are the ones that are being more selective. They have only one option, or not one, but one in a year. But I think over their lives they have like, I forgot, like maybe 20, 30, I forgot the exact number, but men can have, like, theoretically speaking, no limits. When a second born child come into the family, the first child tend to help the parents with taking care of the newborn, and therefore be more responsible and conscientious. Yeah, I said it right. So that's why the older child is usually more responsible and conscientious, because he's helping the second child and helping the parents with the second child. So that's one of the reasons. The last child of the family tend to have less authority and therefore tend to attract attention by being rebellious or similar. They have no authority, no one cares about them, so they just attract attention by whatever ways, by being rebellious or similar ways to just attract attention, because if not, no one pays attention to them. Not enough, at least. The amount of stress affects puberty for females, which is more stress means earlier puberty, probably because stress benefit quantity over quality in reference of having kids. So there is some studies, the more stress you have, the earlier the puberty will be. So it's probably because stress benefit quantity over quality. Just like, okay, you need to reproduce fast as you can before something is going wrong, because usually in an environment of stress you have less probability of living. So you guys are like, okay, so you do it faster. It's I like this theory. It sounds very logical and true. According to one theory, it should be according to one theory, there are some mistakes I see. All of our behaviors, long day, huh? All of our behaviors can be narrowed down to approach versus avoidance. It's like an interesting theory. So instead of like Big Five or the 16 personalities or all those, you can have one spectrum, one scale to have, approach versus avoidance. Do you go for it or you run away? It's like a 0 and 1 kind of an idea. I like more simple theories. So either you do or you don't. Yes or no kind of an idea. Which you can, all of our behaviors can be narrowed down to that. Interesting ideas. Interesting idea. Theory. Next one is, nurture does not mean only your parents. It also means your surrounding environment. Usually you say, oh, nurture is only what your parents did. No, there is a lot of, you're in school, you're with friends, that's also considered nurture. That variability of nurture versus nature when referring to height is 0.9, but intelligence is only 0.5. So how much it varies. So when we talk about height, there is a 0.9 nature versus nurture. So 0.9 for nature, but intelligence is only 0.5. But the same. So nature or nurture have the same contribution to intelligence. Among the big five, the variability of nurture versus nurture is between 40 to 60% heritable. Means that genetics plays a big role. So that's among the big five. It's about 40 to 60%. So it depends what trait, but it's about 40 to 60% heritable. More weight there is for genetics and heritability. What we inherit is a system that responds differently to different stimulations. For example, how you react to threats. I like this idea of you inherit a system, which means like a tendency to react in some way to a stimulation. For example, how do you react to threats? That's a system you inherit. Many things, emotions, and behaviors in our lives are due to classical conditioning. We get used to behave in a certain way that invoke our reaction. So most of our behaviors and emotions are due to classical conditioning, which I hope it's obvious what it means. So if you do one thing, that's what happens as a result. A leads to B. So we got used to behave in certain ways, and that way invoke a reaction. Individualistic cultures have emphasis on being different and also are more extroverted than collectivists cultures. So individualistics are usually more extroverted than collectivists cultures. Interesting distinction. The conscious brain can only hold one thought at a time. So you can have multi-processes of emotions, only one thought, and that's all you have. So that's the executive function. You can only have one thought at a time. Some people think, you might think, I go all over the place. No, you think only one thing at a time. You might jump from thing to thing, but you think one thing at a time. Self-regulation in some cases is better predictor for academic success than IQ. Self-regulation is sometimes more important, especially for academic success than IQ, because this is what will, even if you have high IQ and you have no self-regulation, you might not succeed as well. Promotions versus prevention focus differ in the way you look back on events. Promotion people look for why and what they should have done, while preventing people think about what they should have not done. So there is like promotion versus prevention. Prevention is like what I should not have done or what I should have done. It's like a little differences between the way you think about events usually that happen in the past. I like this distinction between, I think some people do both. Some people sometimes in some situations they do, what I should have done, and on the other ones, what I should not have done. But I like this little nuance distinction. Antisocial is a person that does not care about other people's emotion and the way they might hurt by him. So this is this definition of antisocial. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about hurting other people. Some people, you're antisocial. You're just like not being social. This is not what antisocial means. Many students that reads mental disorder think they have the same. The thing is that to have disorder is not enough to have the symptoms every once in a while. It has to be constant. So it happens to many students. It even happened to me once in the past. And you read or you listen, you hear about mental disorder and you think, I have it. I might have it as well. But the thing is that what you need to understand is that it has to be constant. If it happens once in a while, everyone have like all kinds of weird thoughts or whatever. But as long as it's not constant, it's not a disorder. Narcissistic person is a person which thinks he is special and he thinks he should be treated better than the rest. That's the definition of narcissistic personality. He thinks he's better or special and he should be treated differently or better than the rest. There are two theories of how people become narcissistic, either for lack of attention and warmth, or for too much of it from the parents. So it can go both ways, two theories, I guess. It's either for too much attention and warmth or lack of it. It's interesting that they have both sides. I like when there is two views that totally contradict one another. It's interesting. Anxiety is a useful tool when used in moderation. Usually warns us from danger. That's usually, sometimes people, oh, being anxious is always bad. No, sometimes anxiety is good because it's warning us from some kind of danger. And probably in today's world, there is not that much danger, or there is a lot of triggers that triggers anxiety, but they're not the right ones. People with avoidant personality avoid interaction when they are uncertain if they will be liked, and tend to have good relationship with family and friends. That's the definition of avoidant personality. They avoid interactions if they are not certain if they will be liked. But usually they do have good relationship with family and friends because they will be liked, something like that. People with OCD oftentimes organize their life to the smallest detail, and they get uncomfortable when things are not organized. That's the kind of a definition of OCD. They plan everything, and they get uncomfortable when things are not organized. There is no system that her responsibility is to make sure we are being consistent. People think you need to be consistent. No, there is no regulation or regulator body that actually tracks your consistency levels. No one cares. That's back to, like we spoke about, the evolutionary. So evolutionary wise, there is nothing encourage you to be consistent. There is only from other people, because they want you to be consistent, but for yourself, you do not have it. A new theory of being inauthentic is that in some situations we just have a different goal. Sometimes we are mostly honest, but sometimes we lie because we have a different goal. So that's one of the theory why sometimes we're being inauthentic. It's just sometimes we have a different goal. Whatever here, sometimes we are mostly honest, but sometimes we lie because we have a different goal. We try to accomplish different things. So we're being dishonest or inauthentic. Inauthentic, I think this is like being inauthentic. This is what I mean. Being inauthentic means that you just don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. If you understand yourself better, you would understand why. So that's about being inauthentic. So going back to this, so being inauthentic because sometimes you just have different goals. That's being inauthentic. That's what you need to understand. So those are two should go together. It's like inauthentic is not being, that when you lie. Inauthentic means that you think it's like out of, well, how do you call this? It's like when you play not as yourself. It's like, oh, what's going on with you? This is not you. So being inauthentic sometimes could be that you have a different goal. And this is what this note here is about, that if you understood yourself better, you would know what exactly is going on and why you're acting in that particular way. That's it for note. That was a long one. Again, this book probably gets, or course gets, between 4 to 5. Didn't decide it yet. Might give it a 5, but I definitely recommend. Very interesting ideas and terminology, I guess. I'm doing a lot of terminology, but good terminology. You know, some terminology is annoying, and this terminology is actually helpful and beneficial. So I'm gonna finish right here. 34 minutes. Thank you.